Hi, everyone, and welcome to one more masterclass by the Learning and Organizational Development Roundtable. I am Dr. Sujaya Banerjee, and I'm the founder of the LNOD Roundtable. And I'm really excited about the masterclass and the theme that we've lined up today. We've also revived after a long time the 7 speakers, 77 minutes format, and I'm really delighted with the lineup of speakers that we have today on obviously what is a very, very topical theme, making talent everyone's business, which it always indeed is. Unfortunately, we got to call that out often. So, making talent everyone's business, demystifying the great resignation. The great resignation has easily been one of the most unprecedented events in the history of talent. And particularly in India, while we had a bit of a lag as compared to the rest of the world, the last couple of months have been very unprecedented in the extent to which many of you who are attending the masterclass today are curious to be able to explore this theme because you experienced a lot of this in the last couple of months, which is basically a mass exodus or mass attrition with large numbers of people resigning from their jobs. Some of the research around this is pretty interesting. I'm referring to some of the Aon research around this, where easily one of the sort of lowest attritions we experienced was in the year 2020, where across the board it's been below 12%, to now easily at about between 21 and 25% in many industries and many companies. I know you have experienced an attrition which is over 50%. So these are staggering numbers, and everyone's curious to know what exactly is happening. Obviously, the knee jerk reaction to this was to be able to revamp compensation and to be able to go back and lure people to stay back with compensation. But that's not obviously a sustainable solution. So the curiosity continues, which is what made so many people want to leave their jobs? Why is this still continuing to be kind of a leaking hole that we're unable to stop? There are all kinds of speculations around the reason for why it is that so many people at the same time decided to let go of their jobs. Almost sounds like sweet revenge, because we saw exactly the opposite happening during 2020, where almost callously a lot of organizations had to let go of people for various reasons, but it left people in a lurch in the middle of a pandemic. So this almost seems like sweet revenge, which is when things started opening up again. The first thing organizations found themselves up against, huge amount of denial at the start, and then eventually reality settling in and some solutions being generated. Some of these band-aid solutions, for example, there was an article in the newspaper recently on asking a group of people on what they did to be able to arrest attrition, and they talked about learning programs and some self-directed learning opportunities and maybe even some career advancement opportunities which have held people back. Some others spoke about fun activities and engagement and the rest of that, but we all know here in the room that none of these are sustainable solutions when a large number of people decide not to pursue their career with your organization. Obviously, a lot of these people moved on to other organizations and to other jobs, but what has been the trigger and what has been basically the reason why so many people decided to be able to seek new pastures, new careers, new organizations to work for? This phenomena, other than the great resignation, has also been referred to as the great reevaluation, which is really reevaluating life, objectives, purpose, values, the way in which you want to be able to pursue your career. Sometimes career breaks or sabbaticals to be able to go back to the drawing board and reassess what career really means to you. Flexibilities, more and more wanting to look at gig opportunities, learning new skills, also joining huge number of people wanting to join a different industry from the one that they've almost tired and fatigued to work for. So I think with that as a backdrop, don't want to take away the thunder from the absolutely brilliant lineup of speakers we have. We've tried bringing in a lot of diversity with who's speaking to you today. So from a very senior and well-respected HR head to somebody who's been an industry veteran and almost a father of HR and talent in India, someone who's an academic, has written a lot of books, and is someone who's constantly researching and curious around talent. to someone who's really young and basically managing talent acquisition within organization is bewildered like a lot of you on the phenomena and the numbers that are pouring in every day for replacements. To having someone who's a line manager and has his own perspective, that we have too much of two HR by HR, and so we wanted to be able to make sure that we brought in a voice which is not from HR. We have a voice from consulting. So some different voices here today. And I wish we would have been able to fulfill our promise on seven speakers, 77 minutes. We don't have our seventh speaker today. Unfortunately, Shilpa Chabria, who's been our seventh speaker, is down with COVID today. And which just brings me to all the excitement in the middle as the pandemic still rages and still continues to do their share of damage. We have some more damage control to be done within organizations. So I think with that, I'm really excited to be able to invite our very first speaker. It's an 11-minute format, so make sure that while the speaker is speaking, you're able to post your questions. Most of you joining us on LinkedIn Live, and so please keep the conversation going, keep the chat going, keep your views and opinions going, keep your questions going. We'll try and bring as many of them to your speakers um, at the end of the six speakers having spoken to you today. So with that, very excited to be able to invite Partner and Chief Talent Officer of Deloitte India, SV Nathan. So over to you, Nathan.
Hi, good evening to all of you. My pleasure being here with you today. And what can I say? Very privileged to be here. So, feels good. The subject of the call, Demystifying the Great Resignation, Making Talent Everyone's Business. Here is what I wish to cover: the Great Resignation, the Great Restitution, and I want to end with the Great Expectation. I love Charles Dickens, and so let me start off with the first line of his book, The Tale of Two Cities. It was the best of times and the worst of times. 2 years of agony, pain, coping, rebuilding. People lost their lives, near dear ones, and of course, things turned topsy turvy. Business caved in, some flourished. But before I go there and make it sound terrible, let me start off with a small story, for this encapsulates all of what happened in the last 2 years. Three people came to an African king's darbar, dragging a young man with them, and said to the king, "O king, this man has murdered our father." King, why did you kill their father? Young man, I'm a goat herd. My goat ate from the father's farm. He threw a stone at my goat and it died. So I took a stone and threw it at the father. Unfortunately, he died. King, because of this, I will pass a judgment. So on charges of murder, I sentence you to death. So the young man said, I asked for 3 days, dear king. You must give me 3 days before you execute your judgment. My late father left me some wealth. I have a sister to take care of. So if you kill me now, my wealth and my sister will have no guardian. So the king said, okay, who will stand for your bail? So a young man from the crowd agreed to stand bail. Do you agree to stand for him? The young man said, yes. You agree to stand for someone you don't know, and if it doesn't return, you will receive the penalty of death? I accept. The young man left. After 2 days, nothing happened. Third day, morning, nothing happened. No signs of the young man. Everyone was afraid that the bail person who had accepted to receive the penalty of death, if he failed to return, this person would be killed. But just before it was sundown, the goat herdsman appeared, looking very exhausted, stood before the king and said, Sir, thank you so much, dear king. I've handed over the wealth and the welfare of my sister to my uncle, and I'm here to receive the penalty. You may now execute me. In great shock and surprise, the king said, and why did you return? After all, you had a chance to escape death penalty and you could have run away. And the young man said, I was afraid. for it would appear that humanity has lost integrity and the ability to fulfill promises kept. So the king looked at the person who stood bail and said, "And why did you stand for him?" And he said, "I was afraid that it might appear that humanity may have lost the will to do good to others, and that's why I moved in." So these words really shook up the complainant brothers, who then went to the king and said, "Please pardon him, sire." The king was very angry and then asked these two, "Why? Why?" And both of them said, "We are afraid, for it will appear as if forgiveness has lost the place in the heart of humanity." That sums up all that we have learned in the last 2 years. Right up on stop, the years have stood for us empathy. The year 2020 was interesting, for it changed the lives, and I dare say the world, forever. The first time the great search began, the meaning of purpose of life. What am I doing? What are my priorities? What actions do I have for the future? Companies froze like deer in a headlight. Stopped wages, increments, even layoff was called on. The MSC sector bore the brunt of the impact. The manufacturing sector got cramps. The services sector could no longer serve, and almost seemed that this was going to go on forever. It is said that when there is an accident, or let's say a cut, at the point of the cut, there is no pain. And then the pain shoots up. There is then a coping strategy and then the way forward. We have gone through all the cycles in the last couple of years. The great resignation actually happened in 2021 because in 2021, 2020, everybody froze. I feel that these are the following reasons. One, a sense of loss and being let down by organizations' actions, be it increments, bonus, burnouts, toxic cultures suddenly come to fore, and the like. Two, the power of freedom to experiment, because now I'm now free. Doing what I like is freedom. An emboldened and resurgent me. A call of making good the loss and the power to ask a 30 to 40% increase, maybe even 50% more, because they've already factored in the 10% that they would have lost in the year that went by with no increase. The realizations that companies were willing to pay. And although there was no spurt in overall jobs around, all this we all know was a very vicious cycle. A sense of entitlement. Yes, post COVID, I appreciate all that, but dil mange more and so on. So let me go and check out what is there in the market. Last but not the least, I love the new me. I have just but one life, so let me check it out. So, what was the response? The response was more in the corner of the great restitution: connect, care, commit. There are several ways to this. It all starts by making a change to the culture at one end, solidifying it, adding to the good work already done. So, connect, care, commit. Connect with people, care for them, commit to the changes that you're onto. So, things like, how do we make good the loss that people have suffered in the pandemic? In several ways. Manage the changes in our organizations given the opportunity that it presented. For example, learning and development. Now, the new way of working, the digital way, the digitalization. How do we get into using the jugards and innovation for greater good and for all? And institutionalize this. Interviewing, for example, using technology. What are the new processes that we introduced that helped us get through all of this? Big questions. How will the hybrid work? Will it work at all? Do I have to force people to come to work? Work from home has changed lives and empowered our women. And the huge value that was placed on trust in all what happened. How do we address wellness? Something that we never even thought of. And now that has come to fore. A couple of days back, I had the opportunity of meeting Mr. Manoj Jain, the CMD of Gas Authority of India, and he said something rather interesting. He had, during the pandemic, spoken to 80% of his people on a 101 during the pandemic. He knew them by name, he knew their families. Astounding. I kid you not. And he has over 7,000 people in his organization. Perhaps this is what is expected. Making talent each leaders, managers, and down the line, everybody's business. What an example to set. I remember that in our own organization, Deloitte, we had a very simple program called Each One Reach One. So everyone got a 30-minute slot bunked into their calendars, and all that we had to do on that day was randomly pick some person in the organization. Cannot be anybody that you already know, but ask the simple question, how are you? It's an agenda-less conversation, 30 minutes. You can even express what's going on in your mind, or you can check with the other person. I noticed a huge, nice, good discussion, and a lot of good came out of that. Let me move on to beyond restitution. What is the new great expectation? So the great expectation that people have started looking at, because people have started to look at organizations differently. Earlier, organizations used human resources to achieve their goals and their needs. People today look at organizations in power, but people's realization that now they have the power to change because they expect the organizations to play to what is important to them. The need from companies extend to looking at people beyond in a holistic way. Wellness is now in the thick and center of it all. Many organizations today have a chief wellness officer. Suddenly, the organizations that used to be looked upon as a nursery of talent, and we will do this way, now they have a not just a mushroom, but a forest that wish to be left alone doing what it loved best. People need empowerment and a latitude to experiment. And of course, I'm not saying all of this is going all over the place. To sum it up, the great expectation is about connect, care, and commit that organizations look out for. And today, what the employees are telling them is connect with me, keep me honest, commit to doing things that are important for me, read development, read growth, and care. Care for what is important for me and my family. I always believe that there is a meaning to stay and a reason to leave. Help me find my meaning, my purpose. This is the clarion cry. Doing what you like is freedom, and that led to the great resignation. Liking what you do is happiness, something that is part of the great expectation. And well, thank you. And here is wishing you all the best for the rest of the programs. We'll be available for questions as they come by. Thank you.
Great stuff, Nathan. Fabulous as you always. I like how you recast this into the great expectation. And the three C's are lovely and seem very, very appropriate in terms of, what we perhaps didn't listen to sharply enough in the recent past. So I'm glad that this is now coming to a head, and I love the connect, I love the care, and I love the commit. So I'm hoping that everyone in the audience is taking note of this. Thank you, Nathan, for being, basically helping with recall and always being so precise and pointed in all the pointers that you bring. So thank you so much for this. I think with that, ladies and gentlemen, we move on to our next speaker. Nathan's going to be here in case you have questions, and we'll keep bringing the questions forth, Nathan, so that you can prepare for the answers as we head towards the end. I think with that, it's my pleasure and delight to be able to invite our next speaker, Prashanth Rao. This time we have a line manager, and he's the group brand head of JSW. And Prashanth, delighted to have you on board. Thank you for accepting
Thank
to
you.
come in and do this. And we're all very curious to hear your perspectives.
Thank you. Delighted to be here. Absolute privilege. Just before we get started, Suneet, I just wanted to check with you. Are you online? And we are set for the slides, right? Perfect. So moving on. I'm here, as Sujaya rightly said, as a line manager. And while Nathan was kind of sharing the big numbers, the big picture, the statistics from an HR standpoint, which you will also hear later during the course of this conversation today, I just want to kind of narrate a story of of what I went through and of having lost a very valuable team member to the Great Resignation. So, moving forward, Nathan, if you could just go. So, I just wanted to kind of start off with this tweet that Harsh Goenka put out. Of course, it's the antecedents of this are a little question marky, but this was a resignation letter which apparently somebody in his organization received, which said, "Dear sir, I resign. Maza nahi aa raha. Yours sincerely." So yeah, I mean, this in a way, probably in a very flippant way, but also in a very succinct manner, encapsulates what's going on right now through India Incorporated as well as the world over. Maza nahi aa raha. What exactly is this maza? And that's really what I want to kind of reflect upon through the experiences that I went through. Um, if you could just move on to the next slide. Just to give you a brief introduction, to put in context the story, I'm Prashanth Rao. I'm the senior VP group head of the group brand at the JSW Group. The JSW Group, as you know, is a $22 billion conglomerate with we are India's largest steel manufacturer, as well, and we also have a presence in steel, in energy infrastructure and cement, as well as adding to India's Olympic caliber through our sports program and reaching out to over 1 million people through our foundation initiatives. In terms of what me and my team does, I lead a very small team, and our team here has been set up with the objective of protecting, promoting, and nurturing the JSW Group brand. This was a function which was started 7 years ago by me, and today what we do essentially is communicating with various stakeholders, both internal and external, to kind of to enhance the stature of the group brand. So this encompasses a wide range of programs, from big marketing campaigns to internal communication initiatives, to working with the leaders of various businesses for their communication needs at external platforms. And to kind of to help us do this, I have a very small team that I work with. I want to narrate the story of a team member who, as I mentioned, I lost to the Great Resignation. As we all know, COVID was a very trying time. 2020 was a time where the world came to a standstill, but at the same point, all of us were individually, organizationally, and societally coming to grips in terms of how to respond to this pandemic. How do we define what it means, what the new normal means, and what that meant for us within the organization, and for me specifically within my role, was to work, on a host of internal comms programs, as well as external communication program, talking about the outreach that we are doing through some of our COVID care centers, etc. This and all this had to happen when the world was at home. So we were dealing with not just our team members but also external vendor partners who were also grappling with the situation and trying to produce work from the confines of their homes. Of course, things became a little better as as the pandemic progressed, but it was essentially the priority was minding home, minding your family, and at the same time keeping the flames burning at the workplace. So while all this was going on, in the last part of 2020, a very valuable team member came up to me and said that they wanted to kind of move on. They wanted to resign from their position here at JSW, And honestly, this was something that as a manager I didn't see coming, because as a team we share a very close rapport with each other. And we shared that it was, if this was clearly a decision which somebody had kind of spent their time on, um, it meant that they had thought through it and they had processed it in their heads, and the current situation was not really working for them. So it was really with a very heavy heart that I had to kind of accept the decision and move forth. But while I did that, I kind of reflected. I mean, I looked at it from as the famous Joni Mitchell song goes, from both sides now. So I kind of looked at it from my perspective as well as my team members' perspective. If you could just move on to the next slide, please. So for the team member, essentially, what I heard when I had the conversation with them was, they needed freedom. They felt this, this pressure of constantly being available, a little overwhelming. They felt the need to set their own boundaries. They felt that working all the time, being available all the time, doing things on a regular basis, irrespective of what time is, was really taking a toll on them. Also, they had their own growth aspirations in terms of where they saw themselves in life, career wise. And those growth aspirations actually were accelerated because of all that's happened in the world through COVID. Because, COVID gave us, a lot of us, a realization that time on earth is limited, and we need to make the most of whatever time we have, and we need to find meaning, like Nathan was talking about purpose in his in his conversation. And this is something I heard very, very starkly and clearly, about the need to find meaning and the need to find purpose. And what they were doing at the workplace didn't necessarily add to what their definition of purpose was. What this meant, what their departure meant for me, was, of course, a loss of a very valuable colleague during a very busy time. As I said, we had a very small team, and turnarounds, organizationally, because of the times that we were operating in, things were happening at a very fast pace, and losing a valuable team member who was kind of trained and synced into the organizational culture was a very big loss. Of course, loss of cadence for work related outputs, and then task of finding a replacement, which was also a very, very big, which is a big task, as all of you know, and our friends from talent acquisition will elaborate on this, I'm sure. But finally, it left me wondering about the employment contract, right? I mean, of course, we are all dealing with a multi-generational workforce here, but the employee-employer contract meant to some older generations versus what they mean to certain younger generations is very, very different. And therefore, it's very important to kind of understand, and be aware that this employment contract per se has, COVID has fundamentally impacted that. So I just want to kind of summarize, my learnings from this. There were 6 learnings. If you could just move forward. And these are both organizational as well as individual. So the first is, of course, that the pandemic has accelerated, as they say in the Great American Constitution, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. All of us perhaps have realized that time on earth is limited, and we have one life. We have to live it, and therefore we have to kind of live it on our own terms. And we are entitled to what we want to do. We are entitled to kind of go through that bucket list now. We're entitled to go take that trip now, reach out to a particular person at a particular time. So, that's very important. And of course, life trumps work. Again, as I said, when you deal with a multi-generational workforce, work formed a fundamental part of a person's identity for an older, generation. That's not how it is for some of our younger colleagues. Life trumps work, and they seek their identity. They see works as a means to an end, and not the end as itself. The need to create meaning at work. I think this is very, very important, because a lot of times, you we may be we know that people have different objectives with their life, and there is a particular frame of time where what you're doing at work, what your work objectives are, what your work KRAs are, what your work deliverables are, will intersect with what you want to do in life, and will enable perhaps what you want to do in life. And I think it's fundamentally important that we are okay with that. So if this means that there are shorter stints within the organization, shorter stints with team members, that's something that we fundamentally need to be okay with. But we need to co-create these boundaries. We need to co-create these terms. So it's very important that we have open, transparent conversations about like Nathan spoke about how you're doing type of calls. It's important that we have those conversations far more regularly than we did before, because people's mental health are impacted in a different manner, and what may seem okay to us may not seem okay to somebody else. So it's very important that we constantly check in on people, but at the same time we create and co-create those boundaries, right? And we ensure that we kind of work within those boundaries once we create it. And finally, we all espouse these values of respecting the individual. But I think one of the things that COVID has really kind of underlined and block printed on all our heads, and if it hasn't, I think the pandemic, we've lost a great opportunity. We need to respect the individual now more than ever and forever, because ultimately, it's not a cog in the wheel who's kind of doing the work for you. It is an individual with their own dreams, with their own aspirations, with their own plans, who's also working, with you to create something, to deliver something. So it's very important that we respect that individual, on a fair basis, and kind of create an environment where we respect our boundaries. So that's really what my learnings were from losing a very valuable team member. I'd be happy to take any questions, and thank you so much for listening in. Sujaya, over to you. We can't hear you, Sujaya.
I just want to thank you. I think that was wonderful. And I love the way you've used something that is anecdotal and personal to be able to draw so many insights and learning from this. So thank you
Thank
for
you.
basically widening up one story for people to be able to understand. And I think all your pointers came out so beautifully. So thank you for that personal sharing and
Thank
also
you.
for keeping time. So thank you for that. And I think with that, ladies and gentlemen, we move on to the next speaker. Keep your questions for Prashanth Rao coming in. We do have some time at the end to be able to take up your questions. But for now, I move you to the next speaker, Shweta Naik. Shweta is the Senior Vice President Global HR at Marsh McLennan. She's making her debut today with the Learning and OT Roundtable. We did earlier have some connectivity issue at the other end, but Shweta, so happy that you can clearly hear us now and we are well
Sujay,
connected.
I can't hear you, but I guess this is my cue to start speaking now.
Yes, yes, please do. Yes, yes, keep going.
Okay, great. So thank you so much, everyone. My name is Shweta Naik, and I'm the Senior People Partner for Marsh McLennan. This is a leading insurance risk broker, which is based headquartered in US. So let me talk about what's the Great Resignation. I think it's a very fancy term coined in late 2021 that was used to define the huge number of people leaving their current jobs at an unprecedented rate. And of course, that was to look for better opportunities. In simpler words, the great resignation is a shift in the priorities of the employees contemplating changing their jobs for various reasons. In fact, the great resignation is increasingly being seen as the great awakening by some and now majorly prevalent in the IT industry. So, what really triggered the great resignation? If anything, I think the pandemic has resulted in reforms in all forms of life for all of us, right? I think the pandemic, when it started in December 2019, It had brought up a lot of uncertainties for a lot of people. People just held on to their jobs, and 2021 things started changing for good. Vaccines were developed, economy was slowly stabilizing, and a good chunk of our population that hadn't quit in the last 2 years started looking for better opportunities. I think that's what triggered the Great Resignation. Although I think the pandemic was not the sole cause, it was a significant factor in accelerating the process in which most employees felt really compelled to reconsider their work situations, to reconsider their personal priorities, which we will talk in a bit. One general trend that I observed when we were looking at some of the data and the insights from what was happening in our organization is the fact that whatever we saw was the early career or the low income community that was resigning more than their higher paid counterparts. And that really was a reason for us to understand what was causing all of this, right? Primarily, I think one of the serious concerns that we heard from a lot of people on the floor was about workplace frustration. I think the pandemic, to some extent, got people to reevaluate their whole priorities and what they were willing to accept. During the pandemic, I think we got a glimpse of good life, what we call as a healthy work-life balance, taking care of family, especially spending more time with children, elderly, no commute time. And when the uncertainty was pretty high, I think people just held on to their jobs despite being unhappy. And I think it's just a matter of time. When the markets improved, they just looked outside for options. And this is something that we also felt was closely linked to the flexibility or the lack of flexibility that we're hearing right now, which has been one of the biggest trigger, especially when work from home, work from anywhere is now a serious reality. Let's face it, we're never getting back to the old normal of crowded offices, hour-long commutes. I think the pandemic really proved that the entire workforce did not need not be in the office to be productive. In fact, we saw that I think most of the people were pretty comfortable working from home and pretty much comfortable working in their pajamas for almost 2 years. So, one major reason why the employees felt the need to switch jobs was probably because when we hear people talking about it, I think it was the compulsion that the companies are putting in to come back to work. It was evident that while we were working from home, everything was good. There was no negative impact on productivity. So people are just asking the same question, saying, why is it that now we need to come back to work when your productivity is as high as 125%? So that's also causing some of the reasons for people to quit and look for something better. The other reason, I think, what I'm predominantly hearing from a lot of colleagues is the increased burnout. I think we have seen that specifically in the IT or the knowledge based services, having quit their jobs due to extreme burnout and stress. They may feel unhappy even when the work pays well because money is not a factor here, job satisfaction is. A lot of these people contemplated during the pandemic and are doing either moving on to pursue their passion or switching on or finding a job role that's less demanding and meaningful. So sadly, a lot of the employers are not addressing this issue because they fail to acknowledge that burnout exists. Prashant was just talking about it, saying mental well-being is an issue, which is possibly also one of the triggers. But that's really true. When you talk to people, the stress, the anxiety, the burnout, I think it's true, and a lot of people are affected, and all of us have been affected, right? Many of our family members have been affected. So I think prioritizing the employee's mental and physical well-being is extremely essential from a humanitarian perspective, and that I think will get more people to stick on to their jobs. With hybrid offices, I think a lot of this are slowly changing. Managers need to be trained, which is what we are doing in our organization. How do you manage flexibility? How do you manage people who probably will be asking for flexibility, especially if there are small kids or elderly to take care at home? Last but not the least, I think there is a lot of focus, which is also around the following the herd mentality, because some people definitely are looking for moving out just because the peers are also moving. It's sometimes just wanting to pursue one's passion. Sometimes you feel that I have reasons because some of my friends, some of my co-colleagues are moving out, and I'd like to move out as well. There's nothing better than possibly sticking on with a company which has been doing good, but sometimes it's just that you want to follow your heart and people really want to take that path. It's understandable that employees also must be feeling that I would like to stick on with an organization who's going to take care of me and my family members. So that's also another reason for people to stick on. Last but not the least, compensation. I know that a lot of people have talked about it, but I don't think that's the only driver, because when we have done our insights, when we have looked at people who are leaving, it's not coming out to be the primary reason. Yes, there are reasons for people to start looking at motivations, and compensation is a motivating factor. The consumer price index rose worldwide during the pandemic. So I think comp will play a significant factor in due course, but right now I don't see that as a reason. All in all, I think the great resignation exposed the new expectations that folks had as a result of the pandemic. Employee expectations have radically altered, and leaders, definitely the CEOs, cannot afford to sit back while losing more of their employees. Sometimes it also scares us as HR, saying, are we doing enough to keep our people back in the organization? The trends may continue across markets, industries, seniority, age groups. One of the things that we are also seeing, and I think that's something that has come out through analysis, is that throwing money at employees really may not help. It will not pause the resignation. Money is no longer enough to get a person to stay. It's not unheard of a person to take a raise and still walk away sometime later, right? So we've seen those cases as well, where you try your best to do a counter offer and people will not stay back. I think in times like this, the CXOs and the HR will have to think very, very quickly about new ways to provide a highly engaging and rewarding work experience to retain the best of the best talent. So, what are we doing to stop the talent from walking out of the door? I can speak from my own experiences. Sometimes organizations, what they're doing differently in creating a great employee experience and creating a great, compelling work culture, that's really helped, especially in a hybrid work environment. Especially, I think the spotlight is now on how people not only view their work, but also how about their work life balance is very important. Hence, the future of work that plays an extremely, extremely integral and key role in retaining the talent. At Marsh McLennan, we have very clearly mandated that office is central to our ways of working. And while permanent work from home is not an option that we are considering, we definitely provide flexibility to our colleagues to come back to work, to actually decide on what schedule works best for them. So we've not said that these are X number of days that you have to be in the office, you have to be X number of days in a month. We've left it to the employees and their managers to decide what works best for you. So we are not getting into that space to tell them this is the kind of thing that has to be mandated for our colleagues. Last but not the least, we've also said that for our new joiners, I think we need to make sure that it's a very, very nurturing organization. People definitely would want to come to a workplace where managers are more welcoming, so that's really helping. Training happens in the office, so that helps. But last, I think the bottom line is that we have to think differently, we have to think creatively. One size doesn't fit all anymore. uh, that's all I could say. But thank you for this opportunity, guys, to bring it all to get to this forum and to talk about something which is the flavor of the season. And we all have our own insights, we all have our data, but at the end of the day, you need to look at co-creating options together with the leadership and the colleagues as to what works best for the organization. Thank you, Sujay and team.
Thank you. Thank you, Shweta. And, I have to thank you particularly for persisting despite all the connectivity issues, but it's all gone off so well and we heard you fantastically well. Suni, do put that down on the chat for her to know that this really, really was a fabulous 11 minutes, full of experiences, full of insights.
Sorry, I can't hear anything.
This is the second speaker talking about managing expectations and having the humility as employers to be able to hear this voice, hear the look into and hear into the silence. and read between the lines and understand what it is that the employees may be trying to say, which they may not have articulated well enough, oftentimes because we've just not taken the effort to be able to listen to them. But I think some very, very good pointers, including that the compensation sort of band-aid is not sustainable. And while it works in the interim, it can easily turn around to still causing maybe delayed attrition. So thank you for making some very valuable points, Shweta. I think with that, we move on to our next speaker. And this time I'm really excited to be able to invite Rajesh Kamath. Rajesh is the co-founder of Chanakya Consulting. Many of you may already know him. He's also on our governing council. So thank you, Rajesh. And he's done a great job stepping in for Gauri, who's also come down with COVID today. So thank you very much, Rajesh, for doing this for us. And I think with that, over to you, Rajesh.
Yes, thank you, Sujaya. So, namaste to all of you. Folks, you may have heard me on other programs, other sessions which have uh, been there in the past for the Learning and OD Roundtable. Today, this is going to be a different topic altogether, the Great Resignation. Well, how much we've heard on the Great Resignation, and for now it seems like we've been listening about it for at least 2 years, maybe more. Uh, However, I want to tell you that dissatisfaction or disengagement or whatever you want to call it as one of the primary causes of the Great Resignation is not a new thing. You heard me right. It's not a new thing. In fact, it's ancient. It's at least 10,000 years old. So I often quote from Indian wisdom, and so this time too, I'm going to share with you a story which goes right back to our stories at time from Puran, and hence it is called that. So we have a large set of stories which are referred to as the Puran because they are talking about the ancient times. The story is short, but the lessons are very powerful. And then we'll see how they are equally relevant today, what you can do about it. So here we go. So once upon a time, there were three realms, three worlds, if you will, but you can also refer to as the three hierarchies. They were Patal Lok, Prithvi Lok, and Swarga Lok. Patal Lok consisted of whom we refer to as the Asurs. Prithvi Lok consisted of the Manavs, and Swarga Lok consisted of the Dev. It so happened that all of them were created by Brahmadev, who existed in a different lok of himself, his own realm, called Brahmalok. And one such occasion arose when the residents of all these three lok were unhappy at the same time, dissatisfied, discontented, disengaged. And you can imagine what these numbers ran into. And we think the Great Resignation is the greatest resignation. All these people, all these residents of these three worlds were unhappy, and they decided to go to their creator, Brahmadev, and seek a solution for their problem immediately. Now, I could go one by one, but I want to tell you in very brief what answer they got from Brahmadev when they went over there. So the Devs arrived first because they were closest in proximity. So the representatives of the Dev Lok, of Swarga Lok, of the Devs, reached Brahma Lok. He was deep in meditation. They reached there first, and they waited till he opened his eyes. The moment he opened his eyes, they said, "Oh, Brahmadev, you are our creator, you are our father, but we are very unhappy today. You have to tell us a way how to get our satisfaction back. How do we reclaim our lives? He just opened his lips for just a few seconds and he uttered the syllable da. And then he went back into his meditation. You heard right, just da. But the Devas were very happy. They thought they got the answer to their problem. They were very delighted and they went back. And they, whatever they heard and what they could make out of it, they went back and shared with all the residents of Swargalok. Then next came the representatives of Manavs, of Prithvilok, our representatives, right? They reached Brahmadev. Once again, Brahmadev was in deep meditation. They waited until he opened his eyes. When he opened his eyes, the moment they saw him open his eyes, they immediately shared all their problems and they said, please give us a solution now. And Brahmadev opened his lips once again, just for a few seconds, and said, da. Went back into meditation. But the Manavs too, magically, they thought they had the answer to their problem. They got it, they got delighted, and went back happily and conveyed what they made out of it to their representatives on Prithvi Lok, the fellow Manavs, the fellow humans. Last but not the least, from Patal Lok came the Asurs. And the Asurs also did the same thing, waited till Brahmadev came out of meditation. The moment they saw him open his eyes, they immediately poured out all their dissatisfaction, discontentment. At least they poured it out. They didn't just run away, and sought an answer to their problems. Brahmadev once again opened his lips for a wee bit and said, da. You got it right. Again, they were very happy that they got the answer. They went back satisfied and shared it with the rest of their race. So what did they make out of that single syllable da? After all three got only da, da, da. So let me tell you what they understood. So when the Devas went there, remember, this is of the topmost hierarchy. And they understood that da to mean damyata, a Sanskrit term which means self-restraint. The Devas had actually indulged so much in all the luxuries in Swarga that they no longer felt any satisfaction or joy out of it. So they were advised to exercise restraint. Okay, we will see later now what that means for us. So restraint was the answer for the Devas. They understood that they had been indulging too much. Now they need to, maintain some restraint, control themselves, and they'll be much happier. They were satisfied. After that came the Manavs. The Manavs were also told the same da, but what did they make out of it? They understood it to be dana. I repeat, they understood it to be dana. And dana, mind you, is not just charity, my dear friends. Dana means giving. Give of what you have. The Manavs, just as in present times, had been so used to consuming, that they had forgotten to pass on. They had forgotten to give. They had forgotten to circulate. So they learned now that they need to circulate. And then finally came the Asurs. The Asurs also heard the same syllable, da. But what they made of it was daya. And they too realized that actually they had been so ruthless, filled with so much of emotion, that they had not cared about anyone else for a while. Now, daya is not compassion, my dear friends. Daya is empathy. You can call it compassionate empathy, if you will, or empathetic compassion, if that helps you. But daya means empathy. So the Asurs realized that now onwards, if they were a little more empathetic, they'd probably not feel that sudden emptiness within of being completely harsh and heartless all this time. So, what is the learning and relevance to us in today's times? You may feel this is so ancient. 100% of it is relevant, my dear friends. No, I am not suggesting that the leaders are Dev and people at the bottom of the hierarchy are Asurs. That's not the lesson. Actually, Devs are only those people with the highest responsibility. We have not understood this from our Puran, from our stories. The Asurs have relatively the lowest responsibility and the least mature. Those at the top of the hierarchy have the highest responsibility and expected to be most mature and evolved. And yes, the Manos right in the middle have medium maturity experience and are the bridge between the two. Therefore, the learning is as follows, and listen very carefully. The leadership today has to not only exercise self-restraint, they have to do self-reflection, self-restraint, and even self-evaluation. Are we being role models for the organization? Are we setting examples that inspire others? How do we need to reorient so that people can truly stay and feel connected? Okay, that's the responsibility of the leadership. What the Manavs learned was done. Now, what the Manavs learned then is applicable to senior management or even middle management today. What do they need to do? They need to give. Give what? They need to listen, give a ear. They need to give time. They need to give appreciation. They need to give love. This is what middle management has to do. Finally, the junior management, those who are directly, you can call them supervisors if you will, depending on the industry, who are in touch with those lay workers, those who are seeing the maximum exits, they need to exercise empathy. They need to be able to see what is it that these people are going through. Feel what they are feeling. Be one with them. Understand what their families want. Try as much as possible to empathize with them while also being part of the organization, my dear friends. So I repeat, leadership need to be great examples. Middle management need to give a ear, need to give appreciation, need to give learning, need to give time. And the junior level of management directly in touch with people need to ensure that they show empathy a great deal more. I hope this story from the Puran has given you a new perspective on the great resignation, my dear friends. I assure you that this story that gave solutions to the residents of the three realms then can give you a fitting solution to today's great resignation. All the best to you. Namaste and Dhanyavad for listening in. Thank you, LNOD Roundtable and Sujaya.
Thank you so much, Rajesh, as usual, using your ancient Indian wisdom tradition and finding solutions from there. Very simple stories with very, very simple but powerful insights and takeaways. And thank you for reiterating the power of listening, the power of empathy, the power of compassionate empathy, empathetic compassion. Some very key takeaways here. And thank you, Rajesh, as always, for being so captivating with your storytelling. I think with that, we move on to Dr. T.V. Rao. Dr. T.V. Rao is a legend, doesn't need an introduction, has been teacher to most of us, and we could not have this conversation, which is full of, so many dilemmas for so many people without bringing in the wisdom of Dr. T.V. Rao. Dr. T.V. Rao is the chairman of T.V. Rao Learning Systems. Has been, a veteran teacher at the IIMs for several years. He's been an architect, literally, of human resources in India. And I think it's a privilege to have you, sir, come in and share your perspective. So over to you, Dr. Rao.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sujaya. Can you hear me? Hello, can you hear me, Sujaya?
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, wonderful.
Yes.
Okay. I'm using my iPhone for somehow, some reason I couldn't get connected on my laptop, so I'm using. So I'm glad you're hearing. First of all, I must congratulate you for the choice of your theme. It's a wonderful theme. The not the great resignation, but the second, the most important part of it, and that is making talent everyone's business. I think that is what is most wonderful, most appropriate, most timely. Why I feel so is because I have been in recent times talking that you are your own HR manager. Everyone is his or her own should take care of his or her own kind of HRD and things like that. So I think this is very appropriate. I'm not very surprised about the great resignation, nor am I bothered about the great resignation. In fact, if any, I welcome it. I wish more people resign. Because for me, resignation means coming to terms with what you want to do. And this is what, in my view, pandemic has taught us, and this is what is underlined in most of the earlier speakers, at least the first three, I think have talked about this. Uh, for those 2 years of the pandemic, when it began sometime in early March 1920, we were not going out. I think we were locked in our houses, and everyone has experienced the same thing, so I don't need to explain. But when I look back, I found that the three of us who were living in Ahmedabad first and later in Bangalore were able to manage our lives very happily with almost about 10,000 rupees per month, because we were doing everything ourselves by and large. And all that you need to spend is on your vegetables, your rice, chapatis, and other kind of things. 10,000 rupees per month. In fact, that is on the higher side. I think one can live very happily with, if you're if you're a 3 member or 4 member family, easily for about 6,000 rupees to 7,000 rupees a month is the biggest lesson, because you wash your own utensils, you swept your own floor, washed your clothes, everything you were doing it yourself. I think that is the most enjoyable part, if you ask me, except a little bit of the fear of whatever was happening across and losing some of the close friends and other members and so on. Now, what does this lesson mean to everyone in the corporate sector? Just the other day, I was traveling with the managing director of a company that manufactures rooftops for warehouses. I think this was, we both of us attended. The managing director would spend the whole day listening to HR people in Bharuch by the Surat HRD network. And we were traveling back to Ahmedabad. And when we were traveling, he narrated to me something about his company. He has about 500 to 700 people employed. Actually, 350 solid, but I think recently they have acquired something. And they are all working in teams of maybe 10 members, 15 members, 20 members in about 30 to 40 locations in India. And they are largely labor from other states of the country coming there. So we were discussing about how do you make sure that these people don't leave your company, and what happened during the early part of the pandemic does not happen to you, and so on. He says, I don't see any reason why anyone should leave, because we are taking good care of all of them. So he went on to narrate, these people don't have a place to stay because they are all the time moving from one city to another as the projects come up. So they have no places, so there is no colony, nothing of that kind. But he said, I'm happy to say that they are all put up in the same place, they all live together. And once the project is over, they keep moving out, and then they go on travel. I take care of their travel, I take care of their life, and I also everything that they save, I think they send to their families, Bihar or UP or wherever they come from in the part of the world. But still, sometimes I do have a little bit of a fear. I want to not only make sure that they are happy with whatever they are doing here, but 100% be certain that they will never leave this kind of a company. I asked him a question. What if tomorrow a competitor comes and then sets up the things and then takes away your people? He said that is a no competitor is likely to come, but that is an issue that I need to think of and so on. And then we went on to talk about the kind of things he is planning to do. One of the things he said is that everything they save, and it is a big saving for their families. And when we got on to talk about what is the way in which I think they can be made happy, one question I asked him, He said, we are going to celebrate it. In fact, lo and behold, just a few days after that, he sent me a video in which I think they all had a big celebration of the 20 years of their existence and so on. The question that I asked him is, did you ever think of going to their villages in Bihar or UP, wherever they come from, and show to them the kind of products they are manufacturing? Maybe if they have created a shelter for some other people. He said that's a good idea. It may be a little difficult, but that's a wonderful kind of an idea. Nowadays with media, anything can be done. So I think that will really add a lot of purpose and pride on the faces of all this. And the conversation went on. I don't want to prolong this conversation, but what does this mean? Post-pandemic, managing director of a company attends a full-day conference on human resource development, and all the time he's concerned about people. How can he make them happy? What is it that he can do to bring purpose in life? What is it that he can do to make sure they live healthy, and so on, and things like that? I think this is what pandemic has taught. And to me, great resignation is an indication that people are expressing themselves. They are saying they have discovered a new freedom in their own mind. Unless you are bound by your own self-made constraints, like I think nowadays youngsters get into take loans for their studies, and later on they take loans for building a house, buying a car, and all these kind of things. I think then you have a lot of constraints, and therefore you feel unhappy. You know that your talent is not being utilized. You are an engineer or you are a technologist and an MBA in marketing and so on. You are neither using marketing nor you are using your technology, but you are doing all routine kind of things, and you don't think this is the best way to use your talent. You want to get out, but you can't do that because you have loans taken, or you have the monthly installments that have to be paid. So these are the people who probably are not resigning, but who are staying there with not necessarily 100% unhappiness, but at least substantial and kind of unhappiness. These are the people who are not able to use their own kind of a talent. Talent is not their business. They are doing something else. But those people who have found this new freedom, who have discovered, like what we have discovered, you can manage your life in 10,000 rupees a month, even if you are a small family. So therefore, let me not bother about it. Let me therefore look for searching for a new identity. I think these are the people who have found the new freedom. That is what Nathan implied. I think that is what also Rao has implied. I think that is what I think everyone implies. We got a new freedom, and it is easily available there. And I don't have anything which keeps on binding me to the organization. So let me discover. I have taken talent is my own business. And to me, the great resignation, if at all anything of that kind, is an indication of newfound freedom, people trying to take talent as a business. And that is why you find in every profession, many entrepreneurs are coming out. There is quite a bit of entrepreneurship. So in that way, I am quite happy about this great resignation. In the process, I have also come up, some of you may have heard with my uh, revisit to Maslow's need hierarchy. I think the pandemic years have demonstrated that. I now say that there are only three categories of needs. First is, of course, the need for survival. You need to survive. If you are living and you are living with good health, I think that is the most important need, which is Maslow's basic needs. Once this is fulfilled, then you have the security needs. You need economic security, you need health security, you have employment security, and you have emotional security. I think emotional security comes from family and friends. Health security comes from, if you happen to work with a company, what the company can give you. And other forms of security, employment, economic security comes from other kind of things. If you have a good organization that is taken care of. Then Maslow talked of social needs, in which I think love and belonging, as I put it, as a security need. Maslow talks of social needs in which need for power, need for recognition, need for status. In fact, I think if you go back to old psychology, people like Henry Murray listed about 30 different needs which are simultaneously operating, some pretty strongly, some very mildly. So human being is very complex with all this set of combinations of needs that are working on you. So I now say that there is only all these needs because you never can understand in totality a human being. The human being is all the time changing. One need is fulfilled, a status need is fulfilled, you go on to something else. Or power needs is fulfilled, you want a social power and things of that kind. So I call this a search for identity. There is only one need. Once the security needs are taken care of, need for identity. So to me, great resignation is a expression of identity. And those people who are not able to use this, I think probably are still searching their identity. But having said that, I don't want to leave the people who are listening to me with a kind of a question mark. What is it that the organizations can do? I think this is a great opportunity for organizations to create entrepreneurship within the company. In the olden days, we called this entrepreneurship, but today I will say, why not? Is it possible for preventing resignation, the great resignation, by redesigning our organizations? I think it is possible. I think there are a few solutions which pandemic has taught. Solution number one, treat everyone with respect. Do not introduce too much of hierarchy. I think we should have a hierarchy-less organizations. So cut down all the layers and de-link whatever people are doing from the kind of salaries you pay to you. Now, this is quite a revolutionary idea, but why not? I think the organization should rethink about, I think, helping people to discover identity. That means you need to understand people and say, I'll not necessarily pay you money, but I'll help you to explore your identity. If you want to work 50% of the time, the rest of the 50% you want to do something else, wonderful, do it. I'll give you, and I will take care of those 50% of your time so that the first set of needs are met. You're safe, you're secure, both emotional, employment security, you will have the job all through the year, but rest of the time, you keep doing whatever you want to do. This is one kind of a flexibility in organizational thinking that is required. I would strongly recommend organizations to break hierarchies and see what is it that they can do. Reorganize, restructure so that you treat every human being working with you, including maybe your customers, including maybe your stakeholders in terms of the board, people who are your shareholders and so on, all of them as constantly trying to meet their higher order needs of establishing their significance, identity in different forms. Particularly for employees, if you have to do that, you need to keep your ears very close to their hearts and understand how people are changing, and do not put rules which restrict their discovery of new identity. That is when people can take charge of their own kind of a talent. I'm sure this is something which is possible for organizations. Arvind and I were doing some interesting work on uh, working out, documenting the lives of 30 of good HR leaders, and I think we have drawn some very interesting lessons. Some of the lessons are very similar to what the pandemic has taught, so I have to put both these things together. I would say provide enough of opportunities for people who are working with you to discover constantly a new identity by giving them job rotation, by asking their preferences, by talking to them, by helping them, liberating them from whatever uh, I think restrictions that you have put. I think this requires a totally new approach to our HR policies, and they should start by saying we respect every human being. People are different. We don't want to have uniform policies. We probably are willing to have, I mean, not a policy. If you want to say it a policy, you can say it as a policy. Every policy for every individual, because every individual is an institution. When I say this, I am reminded of the big secret of how some of these institutions like IIMs, Indian Institute of Science, and others are able to retain their own kind of faculty. We used to have a very interesting system which is still in vogue in IIM Ahmedabad, that every 3 years you can take a year off on leave without pay. But once in 6 years, you can take 2 years off on a sabbatical, and you can go there, work wherever you want. In fact, when I joined IIM Ahmedabad, Ravi Mathai told me that in this institute, any faculty who leaves this institute, our doors is open. You're most welcome to come back whenever you want back. And that is how many people who went to US and other countries came back with lots of experience and taught and made this as a great institute. I think organizations should convert themselves into institutions, come up with innovative kind of structures, use lessons from the pandemic. I'm sure, I think the issue of any resignations don't come into picture. When the whole world is at your feet, where is the question of anyone resigning? Even if somebody resigns, why are you bothered? I think the person will come back more enriched. This is my take. I think organizations should think afresh, think differently, think innovatively, break hierarchies, respect every human being, and get everyone to take charge of their own HR and not depend too much on HR departments alone. Every manager becomes his or her own kind of HR manager. Every employee becomes his or her own HR person. That's what I think. Thanks, Sujaya, for giving me this opportunity to share some of my thoughts on this.
Yeah, well, I mean, you've just been so brilliant that I didn't want to interrupt this flow. I must say that, Dr. Rao, I have never seen you so provocative. I have also not seen you bring forth so many revolutionary ideas at the same time. I think you have another book underway here with everything that you spoke about today. I think they're all extremely relevant, some really, really important pointers, especially around the need for identity, the need to to listen, the need to be able to provide entrepreneurial opportunities, the need to lead the workforce of one. I think you have some very, very powerful ideas here, and I'm hoping that the audience is lapping it all up and taking it away. I must let you go only by saying that there is another book here, and I think there just need to be more people who can access this. I think, in short, I'd only call your talk bringing back the human side of enterprise. And I think that is, very powerfully articulated by you. Thank you, Dr. Rao. Do stay so that we can take up questions towards the end. We're a little behind schedule, but we'll try and ask Bosco to help us. Is Bosco de Mello. And Bosco is also on our governing council. Thank you, Bosco, for agreeing to be able to do this. And I know there is sometimes a disadvantage coming up last, but I have to tell you that with Bosco, that's going to be a huge advantage for all of you as an audience, because I know that Bosco always, but always does not fail you on the thought that he brings in, which is differentiated, provokes you to be able to start thinking differently. And so Bosco, really waiting to be able to hear you this time. Um, Bosco is a leadership development polarities expert and runs a company called Conscious Development. He does a lot of rich work, but at this point, we want to hear from Bosco on making talent everyone's business, demystifying the Great Resignation. So we let you speak last, but with a lot of power to you, Bosco.
Thank you, Sujay. And yeah, it's a great realization to know that all the major themes that I was going to talk about have already been covered by all the speakers before me. So be that as it may, I'm going to try and keep this as short and succinct as possible. I've really enjoyed the stories, Nathan, Rajesh, and Dr. Rao, the anecdote that you shared. Thank you for that. And it's all kind of illustrative of what we're talking about in terms of the Great Resignation. And so, in the tradition of adding something after great, there are so many things to add. I think one thing that this thing has done is made the word great great. So we talk about the Great Resignation. Sometimes it's referred to as the Great Reshuffle, and I like to think of it as more of a great reshuffle than a great resignation, because people, it's not that people have resigned or left their jobs or left what they're doing and are doing nothing after that. They're substituting one organization for another. And while they may be out of work for a while, but they are returning to work, maybe in a different avatar, maybe in a different organization, maybe in a different location, maybe in a different format. And so this great reshuffle is a multi-layered issue. It doesn't have simplistic answers. There's no one trick or one silver bullet that is going to change this narrative. And honestly, I believe that the Great Resignation or the Great Reshuffle is just the visible part of the iceberg. And when we talk about management, we talk about leadership, we talk about behaviors, what we see is the top of the iceberg. But the real mass, the power, the strength, and the depth is what lies below the waterline. And I think the iceberg is is a great metaphor for what is symptomatic about this great reshuffle. And this great iceberg is really what's happening within organizations. The people who have resigned and moved jobs are only a fraction of those who have actually mentally and emotionally resigned but are still employed in the organization and continue to draw their paychecks. So they just haven't resigned, they're there. Okay? But mentally and emotionally, many of them are checked out and they're either consumed by inertia or haven't found anything better yet. If you look at any of the well-known engagement surveys like Gallup's, you'll see that across the years and across the board, it was a little better before, during COVID, because of the nature of people being at home and being constantly on board, etc. But you'll see the numbers have dropped again this year. Over one third of employees in organizations are engaged, just over one third. Two-thirds are actually only partly engaged or actively disengaged. So you have two-thirds of people in the organization who are not contributing their best or not giving up what they're potentially capable of for some reason or the other. And if you look at a cross-section of interviews, either with people who have resigned from organizations or people from recruitment or staffing firms like Randstad or Michael Page, etc., you'll see that more money is only one of the reasons for the attrition. And yes, people are not wanting to return to office full time after the pandemic. That's happening a lot, especially in the US, less so in Europe. That also plays a part. But the fundamental reasons, as the speakers before me have also pointed out, Shweta, Nathan, etc., we are no strangers to those issues. In fact, it's a great deja vu. And it's that organizations, once again, have lost sight of the basics. Now, amongst the engagement elements that Gallup measures, the greatest declines in 2021-22 were in terms of clarity of expectations, opportunities for development, and opportunities for workers to do what they do best. And these are all elements that are foundational to employee engagement. You see a recent report I was reading up by Michael Page. They said that while there is much talk about companies' work arrangements like hybrid and work from home, etc., only 11% of people who have resigned or plan to resign cite this as a reason for resignation. The top reasons are the reasons that have always been there, which is career progression, higher pay, role change, job satisfaction, bosses, toxic work culture. And the report also says that employers are significantly overvaluing how much emphasis candidates place on salaries, bonus, and rewards as the most important motivators. The surge in resignations is really being driven by people searching for the right job at the right company with the right values and culture. No surprise there, right? So during the height of the pandemic, organizations and particularly leadership really had no choice but to show care and concern for their employees. The leaders who had no time for anything but reviews and for transactional relationships with employees were forced to kind of reach out, forced to do things like checking in with people, connecting, relating, all the stuff that they never had time for. But that shift in engagement is what kept the flock together, in a manner of speaking. But once the crisis has seemed to have eased, the old ways of managing people have come back. They've returned. Disengagement is back with a bang. So in many of my leadership coaching sessions, when I'm coaching senior leaders, they speak about attrition being a problem, especially at lower levels of the organization. I think one of the speakers also alluded to that. And what I ask them is, do you really know what's happening in the trenches? They think they know, but most of the time that information is coming from their direct reports, the layer of leadership that's closest to them. So leaders get filtered and packaged information, often what they want to hear. They think that they have a good culture going, but that good culture is enjoyed by the people closest to them, while the culture that drives the levels below may be quite different. In fact, sometimes radically different. So most of the data and coverage on the subject of the Great Reshuffle is consistent in terms of likely causes and implications. And I would say that it's an opportunity for a great reflection and a great reset. So what does that mean for organizations? It really means giving employees more. I think Nathan referred to that dil mange more. So it means giving employees more. And more of what? More money? Not really. Okay, that helps, especially in industries where there's a huge demand supply gap. So the IT industry for one surged during the pandemic, and people were able to command their, the salaries that they wanted simply because there was such a huge demand and not enough supply, not enough qualified people. So their money is certainly a motivator, at least for some levels of the organization. But in a lot of other organizations, it's not really the thick, the sharp edge of the knife. But more is more meaningful work, including purpose. I think Prashanth talked a lot about purpose, including purpose, including new challenges. When I'm coaching the third level of leadership in organizations, they talk about the fact that, we've reached a level where we want more challenge, we want more opportunity, but we really don't know how to get that. Our leaders are too busy with, doing what they do, and they don't really have ear for what we really want. So more purpose, more challenges, more opportunities for development, whether training or coaching or mentoring, more visibility in terms of the work that they do, more engagement, inclusion, and things like belonging, more well-being, and a more enabling culture. So what it really means is more introspection and accountability on the part of leadership to really think of, how do we see this, what's happening below the waterline, and change this? Because this great resignation is only a temporary phenomenon. Things will change. The moment we're hearing talks of a recession in the early part of 2022, so that soon everybody is going to forget about the great resignation and there'll be a new problem. Right? But these fundamental issues are not going to go away unless we really take the opportunity to see what do we need to correct at the heart of the organization, at the heart of engaging our people, at the heart of building cultures that enable and grow people. So we need leadership with more skin in the game, more hands-onness with changing things, and this only flows from the top. So really, it's an opportunity for a great awakening, I think, a great reset in terms of leadership thinking on how do they can keep the organization together and what kind of culture do they want to build. So I'm going to stop here in the interest of time and hand it back to you, Sujit.
All right, great. We almost corroborated on that. I just sent you the 1 minute message, but thank you, Bosco, for keeping it brief but so sharp and with many, many insights. And you almost helped summarize many things that were said during today. So thank you very much for that. And I think with that, I want to be able to honor some of the questions that were asked during the day. And I'm going to try and direct the first question to Nathan. We'll try and keep this brief, everyone. I know we're exceeding a bit, but it's in the interest of being able to use these very stellar speakers that we already have on board today and to try and get their insights on the questions that you're asking. So Nathan, the question for you is that the resignation phenomenon, do you think it's a consequence of mainly a push or pull factor? This is Shahida Hussain asking you this question. I'll repeat that. The resignation phenomena, is this a consequence of mainly push or pull factors?
So it is both. I think it's both a pull and a push. It's a pull from the market because there is the push from within to experiment, to look at what is happening around. And the pull is very, very clear because the lure of the looker is something that one is always looking at. But more than that, wanting to really experiment with what is available outside. If there were opportunities within, nobody will look outside. On that topic.
Good point. Just wondering, Bosco, do you want to add to that? If at all, is this a push or a pull? And I know that the easier answer is to say both, but try and tell us how push and pull.
I think I echo what Nathan has said because I don't think there's any one kind of factor. And I would think it's more, but if anything at all, from what we've seen, because after the pandemic, we've seen this surge. It's almost like, revenge quitting kind of people going. So it's a pull of what they think is a better world out there. What's a better place to go? What is a better opportunity?
Yeah, I don't know about better, but certainly different.
But I can tell you one thing, Sujaya, Many
Yeah.
people are coming back.
Mm.
People talked about
Mm.
culture. They
Mm.
realized that, okay, fine, I think I've seen the outside world, let me come back because I
Yeah.
think this world is a better world. So
Yeah.
many organizations are tapping their alumni. You don't even have to persuade them. They all want to come back.
All right. That's great, and I'm sure you're experiencing that already, which is the
That
reason
is
why you're saying this. One more question for you, Nathan. How does human resources? This is now from Shima Raina. And the question is, how does human resources ensure that learnings from the pandemic are not forgotten as things get back to normal? It is easy to slip back into old ways. So, what is your
exactly,
advice
exactly.
to HR folks?
So I think I spoke about it very briefly though. I talked about institutionalizing certain processes.
Hmm.
So if it's about connect, very clearly you need to find a way to not do it in times when everything is kind of falling apart, but forget when things are getting better. So all processes, any human process, we must be able to institutionalize.
Hmm.
The second big thing is it's not only to to see the relevance and check whether it is working.
Hmm.
Many times we get into policy making and putting all these things in place, but we don't recognize that is that relevant? Is that something that we want to come back, check
Hmm.
on it, and if it doesn't work, let's just move it by the side and move on. So you
Yeah.
need to do two things: institutionalize part of it, review it,
Yeah.
and your greatest asset are your listening ears. And I think the Rao spoke about that. I think you got to listen to the voice of not just the said, but the unkahi, the voice that you don't hear, the unkahi.
Yeah, very great point. I have a last piece which I didn't want to put up right at the start to be able to sort of steal the thunder of all the speakers. But this is a poll that the LNOD Roundtable ran on LinkedIn, and I'm going to request Suneet to be able to share the outcome of the poll. This is for everyone to take a look at this. We asked, and we got over 400 responses to this. The question was, what do you believe are the triggers for the Great Resignation? And you'll see a lot of the answers there. This is validated by sort of LinkedIn folks. We got 49% on toxic cultures, 22% on poor boss management, 19% on not feeling valued, and only 10% on poor compensation. And so I think for everyone who thinks it's about compensation or is finding some sort of band-aid solution, like, we're going to try and have fun activities for them, or we're going to try and basically create more training programs for them. Unless this is structured into career advancement, unless this is about caring about what happens to their learning and to their growth, most importantly is the fact that how do we land up with so many people experiencing toxic cultures. And I think that could easily be a reason for burnout, easily be a reason to want to look at just what is there outside before, like you said, Nathan, some of them have basically decided that it's easier to be back. But toxic cultures basically, call for new behaviors, new mindsets by people who are actually managing these people. And I think that is the more difficult work that organizations really need to be investing in. But I'd love a reaction. I mean, Dr. Rao, you're on the line. React to what it is that you can see here on the screen. I'd ask you all to just keep your responses really brief, but I don't want to let go of the opportunity for you to respond to what you're seeing on the screen right now. Dr. Rao?
Sorry, I didn't get. Can you hear me? I didn't get the question.
Yeah, the question is that you can see some data on the screen. Do you want to respond to that data? Yeah, this is the question we'd asked on LinkedIn. It's a poll question. What are the triggers for the Great Resignation? And these are the responses we have. So,
I think good. If I see the biggest percentage is that culture.
yeah, toxic cultures, yes.
I think that
I,
is
I,
very.
I
That's.
read that. I'll read that for you. Poor boss management. We took this from another research to validate it. That's why you're seeing
Yes.
these options. So poor boss management is 22%, toxic cultures is 49%, poor compensation is 10%, and not feeling valued is 19%.
I think I agree with this. This is very, very, very close to what I think we have all been saying. The
Yes.
term toxic includes so many things. Not
Yeah.
respecting people. I'll start by saying not respecting people. So good survey. It's a fairly representative of the truth.
Right. Shweta, I don't know if we can get your voice, but yeah, is this better now? Can we get a reaction to what you just saw on the screen? Okay, now we're not being able to hear you. Sunit, you just want to post that. Yeah, unfortunately, we're not being able to hear you. I'll take a quick one from Rajesh. Rajesh, do you want to come in?
Yeah, I feel actually toxic culture is a combination of the other points.
Okay.
I mean, one can put it separately, but if you see toxic culture consists of not having a good boss, perhaps, or not
Yeah,
being valued. When all of them come together, what do you get? A
yeah,
toxic culture. That's why probably that's been rated highest, because people over there felt that all of these or some of these reasons show up. So again,
right,
not surprised, like Dr. Rao said.
right. Bosco, we'll let you have the last word on this and then we'll try and bring this to a closure. We're 10 minutes beyond time, so I'll just try and get your reaction to that.
I think I read a very interesting definition of culture, which is that it is measured by what is tolerated.
Hmm.
And for far too long, organizations have tolerated all kinds of behavior which has kind of pushed people to the brink.
Hmm.
So I think toxic cultures is a very, very important fact.
Hmm. Hmm. And I think increasingly to not treat well-being as just some program or whatever. I think well-being is a culture, and well-being it basically requires you as a leader to be able to be sort of alive to what's making people enlivened, what is making people saddened, what is making people depleted in their energies, and so on, and not just carrying on with work because that's what needs to basically get done. And I think some of the distance has perhaps aggravated this, but the responses are obviously varied across organizations. But I think what the Great Resignation has indeed done, what Dr. Rao calls the Great Identity, some of us are calling it the Great Awakening, is that it's brought a lot of issues to the head. And like some of you were mentioning, what a brilliant opportunity to be able to, fix the workplace, get the workplace to be positive, get the workplace to be joyous, let the workplace to be able to kind of leverage the potential the workplace has of bringing so many unique human beings together who spend so many hours together and bring more purpose, more more life, more excitement, more energy, more positivity to life because of work. And I think so here is our opportunity to redefine work, to be able to redefine workplace, to redefine what we create at the workplace. And so the Great Resignation is indeed an opportunity. And Dr. Ravi, share in your excitement of the Great Resignation. And
Great
I'm hoping,
expectations.
yeah, it's full of such great expectation. Thank you, Nathan, for adding that. And all of you, thank you for making this such a brilliant platform and for your very honest sharing. Prashanth has had to leave, but I think it's just been fabulous. All the effort everyone's made here to be able to make this so wonderful. So thank you very, very much, everyone. One more time until the next masterclass, where we will bring you in another time. But otherwise, thank you for making this so fantastic. You're seeing some of the comments up on the screen already.
Yes.
Rini and a couple of others who stayed back to be able to listen to this. Um, yes, Sandeep, I couldn't agree more. Dr. Rao, waiting for that book. Yeah, whether you want to call it. Yeah, you have you already have the new hierarchy as well. There's Dr. Rao's hierarchy, motivation, and there is the Maslow's, and I'm really excited with Dr. Rao's version. So, Dr. Rao, thank you, Bosco, for all the time. Nathan, cannot ever thank you enough. You always so encouraging and say yes immediately, and thank you for honoring your commitment to me despite a very busy schedule. Shweta, you've been most tolerant, and I'm sorry that your debut's been full of so many technical snags, but we're just so excited that you did come in and we could hear you perfectly well when you spoke, and you spoke so well. Rajesh, thank you so much. We'll always remember, all your three, did you call them loks? They did different, your Swarg log and Pata log
Yes.
and all of your looks were just
Trilo.
absolutely, fantastic. And thank you for your story sharing as always. Take care, everyone. Have a great
Bye,
evening.
everyone.
Thank you,
Thank
everybody.
you for inspiring
All the best to
everyone
everyone.
to make. Thank you for inspiring everyone to make talent their business. So thank you for doing that.
Thank
Take
you.
care, everyone. Yeah, see you soon. Bye.